For me, normal was violence, going out and selling drugs, getting my money. I didn't necessarily like what I was doing. I felt lost. I felt like there was more to life than this. I chose to change because of a circumstance. As a guy came into my house and he had a knife, and I picked up a hammer. He went to surgery and I went to jail. I was looking at 4.5 years in jail. And when I was in jail, well, I met a Chaplin Barb. Decided there was more to life than always ending up in jail and not having anything to do with the rest of the world. I felt lost. I felt like there was more to life than this.
All right, what's going on, everybody? That was tonight's guest, Tommy LaPlante. I'm Daniel Unmanageable, and this is Hard Knox Talks, coming at you from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Treaty Number 6 territory, and the traditional homeland of the Métis people. Before we bring in Tommy, I just want to remind our viewers and listeners that to stay to the end for a powerful sneak peek at next week's guest, speaker, advocate, person in long-term recovery, Brad Siroski. Bad Siroski. You can tap the featured link at the bottom of your screen at any time to set a reminder for next week's show. Enough of that. Let's bring in Tommy. Tommy, how are you?
Hey, everyone. I'm doing okay. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing well. I like your shirt. We just want to throw a shout out to Born Resilient Clothing for sponsoring the giveaway tonight. They're throwing down a t-shirt. So you can either join our email list or drop your sober date in the chat. I kind of made a mess of that already. And be entered to win during the live stream. If you're watching the recording, sorry, better luck next week. We do this every week. Tommy, is there anything that you'd like to say before we get started tonight?
Yeah, my sober date is October 17th, 2019.
Put him on the wheel.
You don't have to put me in. I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, you got to put it in the chat.
On the last one.
Yeah, and I'm still getting caught up on the ones that threw them down already. So I basically got first names in, and now I'm backtracking. So wish me luck here.
Yeah. I woke up today and I didn't have much of a voice. Can people hear me out there?
I think so.
Oh, good.
I can hear you.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Okay, well, without further ado, let's go.
This is Hard Knox Talks.
Okay, before we dive in, I just want to let our viewers and listeners know that tonight's live production is premier sponsored in part by Possibilities Recovery Center, serving Saskatchewan right here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and we're going to learn a little bit more about them in a bit. But first, we are going to grill Tommy. Tommy, we learned a little bit about you in the intro there. We touched on a few little key points, but why don't we go further back? And why don't you start from the beginning? You grew up in Saskatchewan, correct?
Yes. I grew up mainly in Saskatoon. My dad worked for the Saskatchewan Liquor and Gaming Authority. Mm-hmm. I come by the alcoholic part very naturally, I guess. Mm-hmm. My dad, not that my dad has any problem with alcohol. My brother and my dad, they're not alcoholics by any means. They never had a problem with it, but I certainly developed quite a problem with it. But so my dad opened up liquor stores all across Saskatchewan. He's a very popular, good-looking guy. Might have had 4 wives. He's but a heck of a guy. He raised us, and he always did his best to provide. And after my mom had left, we ended up with a terrible stepmom that, well, she was very abusive. In the next few years, I experienced every type of abuse that affected me, even to this day, the fear of abandonment, just the physical, mental, and the spiritual abuse. As a kid, she was a Catholic lady, and she would quote scriptures, spare the rod, spoil the child, and she beat on us. But my brother turned out good. Shout out to my brother if you're watching. We lived in Esterhazy. I remember growing up, Dad did his best. He got us involved in sports, playing ball and stuff. We had a lot of fun. We used to go on camping. The childhood, it could have been, well, it was good, but there were parts that just went bad. And it was kind of a 50-50. I already mentioned my brother. He's a pretty good guy. He's pretty successful and stuff. And um, myself, I developed a drinking problem. Um, I guess around 14 or 15 years old. Yeah, definitely at 15 years old, I moved out to my dad's house and went and lived on my own. If there's anyone watching
here.
that's 50.
Sorry to interrupt you, but was there a lot of drink? I mean, you mentioned your dad opened liquor stores all over the place. Was there a lot of drinking at home? Like, was it normal for you to be around a lot of drunk people growing up?
No, not normal to be around drunk people unless I was over at my uncle's house. I had a pretty crazy uncle, and he'll come up in the story in a bit. But no, alcohol wasn't a problem around our house. In fact, it was normal that there would be alcohol, and people, weren't drinking it. It was there. So, but I guess as this story goes, I mentioned about the abusive mom. After the abusive mom came, she was abusing both of us, and it came out one time. We went to go visit our mom out in Ontario, and my brother told my mom about the abuse that we were having, and so my dad he got us a place away from all of that, and we were a family unit, the three of us, and like 6 years old and having to cook. 5 and 6 years old, my brother and I were helping out cooking and doing dishes and stuff at a young age. I enjoyed those years, to be honest. And then dad brought in another girlfriend and then another wife, and I was messed up, man. We did go to a little bit of counseling, but I didn't trust it. And in fact, there was this moment where they tried to bring the Marge, this stepmom, they tried to bring her back, and then I just didn't trust. And that not trusting, it stuck with me for a long time. Not trusting adults, not trusting anyone, right? My Uncle Mike, I briefly mentioned him earlier. He came in, and I honestly thought, like he's my dad's younger brother, and I thought he was going to be like a knight in shining armor. No one's going to abuse us anymore. But my Uncle Mike, he was an alcoholic, and I think he'd even admit it if you and he was very abusive. We were spending some time over there, and I don't know how much I should share because my brother might not be comfortable with some of this, but there was one time where he was beating on his wife, and we were going to run and get her some help, and he sicked the dog on my brother and threw me up against the wall and put a knife to my throat, and I was 7 years old, right? Wow. And this is the knight in shining armor that I loved, and to be honest, I still love my Uncle Mike. I really do. I went to visit him maybe a year or two ago in the hospital and told him I forgive him. And, but yeah, he was something. And then, that was when we were living in Esterhazy. We ended up moving up to Prince Albert, and you know what? Prince Albert was fantastic. My brother, Ricky Cross, he mentioned, he was in the comments there. He's from PA. It's a deadly place. It's a fun place. I enjoyed it in PA.
I like how you say it's a deadly.
Deadly cousins, right?
Yeah.
That's where I found out that I really was Métis, right? And so I didn't really have much of an identity. We weren't brought up with that as our culture. There was a stigma attached to being First Nations and Métis back then, and obviously there still is now, and that's terrible, right? Because without our identity, we'll be lost. And so now, as a Métis man, I've learned to find out, and I'm still learning what does that look like. And there's so many more other people just like me that weren't brought up with it, but we're finding our way back and trying to give to our community. But anyways, living in PA, or you were going to say something?
Yeah, well, I was just going to how old were you the first time you got loaded? And tell us about it. Like, was it like you found your way home the first time you got loaded, or what was it like?
Truth be told, I was talking about when we were out visiting my mom, and my brother had told my mom about what was happening at home. I'd snuck off because my mom's common law, we'll say. Uncle Bob is what we called him. That's a whole different story. I'll tell you when we're not on the air.
Okay.
Well, Uncle Bob used to pour rye into his Pepsi. They had Pepsi cans out there, and I was always taken off with these Pepsi cans. And so I was like 6 years old and just lit, and I had a good old time, to be honest. And that's when I noticed that I liked drinking. I guess I was 6 or 7 years old. So,
oh, wow. Got a young start.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't, I kept doing it all the time then, but I guess when I was 14 and 15 though, but I mean, it's a phase that a lot of kids go through, I think. Right. I mean, I did work, with youth and stuff. And so I hear that a lot. And so, but it didn't stop for me. Right. I continued to use despite all these negative things that were happening in my life, like, moving out and having to live on my own because of my behaviors of how I behave when I didn't have the alcohol or didn't have the drugs. I just became violent. And so I got into some trouble with the law when I was living on my own, like at 15, and maybe I was 16 at this point. And then the courts put me into the care of my Uncle Mike again. And so my Uncle Mike, and he meant well, right? He's giving a place for his nephew. There wasn't much food around, but there was alcohol and drugs around. But I don't know. It was a bad place, to be honest. And I love my Uncle Mike, but he was very involved in drug sales, and there was women coming and going all through the night.
Did that feel normal to you at the time? Like, did you think that this is how it was for everyone?
No, because I had the exact polar opposite over at my dad's place, right? So there was family, there was connection, there was those things. So I knew that wasn't normal, but I normalized it, right? Like it was like, you just dealt with whatever was coming by. And so, and as a kid, I didn't know anything about ADHD back then. It was just that kid doesn't listen. Right. So, and so I wasn't good at school. I wasn't, my processing speed isn't that quick either. It takes me a while to get a few things. And so I didn't fit in. And so I was an outcast, kind of, because I wasn't very intellectual. I wasn't that good at sports, and I was pretty small at that time. And it wasn't until later that I got bigger. And then I started to get angry and violent, and I was drinking and using drugs. And as I mentioned, we were living with my Uncle Mike, but that all came about and came to a head when there was I got into a bunch more trouble with the law and put into young offender facilities. And eventually, it was my dad. He came around when I was there, and he gave up his common law marriage at that point. Actually, I think I was the cause to a couple divorces of my dad's. Dad, if you're listening, I'm sorry and thank you. I love you. I know you always did the best
sorry for
you
blocking.
could. And no. There's two definite divorces that I might have cost him a house. I was
let's take a break. Let's take a quick break and look at some questions. Yeah? All right. Just gotta make sure she's ready.
Okay. So looks like our first is from Carly Jane. Thank you for your comment. She says, fear of abandonment is huge for me. And next up is comment from Wendy Gore Hickman. Thank you so much for being here, Wendy.
Where's the endearing inflection? And we have Wendy.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wendy. You're just such a driving force here in the recovery world in Saskatoon.
Yes. And next up comes from John Peterson. Says, clean since May 2011. Tommy, always an inspiration.
Love you, John.
Hey, before we look at any more comments, I just want to just remind you to tap that featured link at the bottom of the screen so that you can set a reminder for next week's show with Brad Siroski. we've got one more here.
Okay, and next one comes from Soul Support. Thank you for your comment. Says, used to be one of my biggest as well until I came to terms and accepted the things leading up to this feeling of abandonment for me, and then replaced it with the feeling of the ones abandoning were actually doing me a favor by removing the obstacle holding me back to a stronger self. Wow, that's a deep comment. Awesome.
What do you figure, Tommy? Can you relate to that?
Yeah, I think that's a good reflection, right? Those people that I lost along the way, they weren't really meant to be here at this point where I'm healthy, maybe. Yeah. Oh, and I'd like to say something about Brad Siroski next week. You guys tune in for this one. Brad's amazing. I love that guy. I was there the day that he started his first day in treatment, and I tried to share everything that I could. No. I tried to share everything that I could with this guy. And so, but that student became the teacher so quick. He's amazing.
So tell us, you just mentioned, and a little bit in the intro there, you talked about you would go out, you would be violent, you would get your money, things like that. Was that like part of your, what you might call a job at the time?
Okay, I'll speed it up to that point then. Okay, so the time that you're talking about was, I guess after 2000 and well, it's after September 11th happened. So I got a pilot's license. My boyhood dream is to become a pilot, right? And then when the World Trade Center bombings happened, I lost all ambition, and I went back to the bars, and I started drinking a lot and using a lot of drugs. And then eventually I couldn't even keep my own job because I was always drunk and high. Right. So then I was selling drugs and I was violent. I did whatever I could to get my money. And there's a lot of people out there that I hurt in that time. And I am sorry if you are the person watching. There was more to life than that. And no amount of regret can change what I did, but I found my way out, and there is a better way for anyone that is struggling with that. I like how you always say it too. Don't struggle in silence. Don't struggle in silence, right? Just reach out and ask for some help, because we'd love to connect you to some help.
Absolutely. So at what point in your life did you start to realize that, like, maybe you realized early on that what was going on in your life wasn't normal, but when did you start to think that maybe I should start to take action? Like, did it take incarceration? Did it take a really bad thing for you to realize that I need to make a change? Or did you know for a long time and just not take action?
Well, it's that wee small voice, right? Everything else comes at you a mile a minute, but that small voice, that quiet voice was peaceful, and there was more to life. And but I kept just trying to do it my way, right? Just whatever came up, handled it. And so it was incarceration that brought it out. But there was a point where, before I was incarcerated, where I met a guy, this guy, Bobby Walker is his name. And the guy was full of life, and he was alive, and he was talking about this place called Teen Challenge that, well, I don't know. He was kind of killing my buzz, to be honest, but because I was kind of baked, and
just harshing my buzz, this guy.
Oh, he was. But then not only did he kill my buzz, but he killed my friend's buzz too, because I went to my friend Randy's place, and then I'm telling Randy about this, and he's just like, "Shut up about this, man." Right? And so, because it's about Jesus and stuff. So the guy used to, and so Bobby used to use crack, and he had quit. He went through this program as a full year long, and I was like, a year? Wow, that's a long time. I could never do that. But of course, if you know my story, I did that, and I was there. Well, it wasn't just a year. I got in some trouble. It was 13 months and 9 days I was at this program later, but. So I did hear about Teen Challenge before going to jail, and I said to my dad, "There's this program called Teen Challenge." I didn't talk to my dad a lot back then, but I told him about that, and he, he kind of said, like, "Well, you're not exactly a teen." And so, and I didn't know enough about it either. And it was $1,100. And I had been to my dad for money so many times before. Right. So I can see where he was just like, you'll find a way if it was meant to be, right? You're like a cat. You'll fall, you'll land on your feet. And so I didn't know how, but maybe there was a way. And so for me, I knew that it was the place for me to go to, because I quit crystal meth. Um, I still selling drugs though, but I quit crystal meth in July of 2009, and it was with the prayer, and it wasn't as if I was, a man of faith. I never, opened up a Bible to read it for any purpose or anything. In fact, I think I used the Bible for rolling papers in jail a few times before that, but that was about it. Right. And so, but I did this prayer with a meth pipe in my hand, and I said, like, help me. I don't want to do this. Like, even the people that I get this off of, they're afraid of me because I beat them up too. And so I don't want to be like this. I don't want to be a burden, and I don't want to be feared. I don't want to have any of this. And so I only used meth one time after that. And then it was one of these moments where I was like, why isn't this working? And my own mouth said, like, I've already cured you of this. And I was so sketched out. So I was like, okay. And you figure I would have just given into this, because God's real, I thought at that point, but I figured I would have just given into it at that point. But I just stayed away from crystal meth because it sketched me out. I thought I might be like developing schizophrenia, right? Because I could hear myself talking and stuff. And so, yeah, it wasn't long after that. It was October 17th, 2009. That's the day everything changed. My nephews had come into town, and my brother was in town, and they were gonna come over and see me. And I believe we were gonna watch the Rough Riders. They were making a charge into the playoffs at that point. And this guy came into my house, and I knew my nephews were coming down, but this guy came into my house, and he had a knife. And I could tell he had a knife by the way he was grabbing at his pocket. And I picked up a hammer. It was a 3.5 pound dead blow hammer. And I got close to him, and I told him, well, the edited version, get out of here. It's not going to end well for you. That's the edited version, right? Get the F out of here. And so, he cracked me a couple times, and I had this hammer, and I tried to hit his hand, right? As his hand came close, I tried to hit it with the hammer, and it bounced, like the hammer bounced off his arm, and it hit him in his head, and he went down. And I was like, just stay down, man. Don't, like, please don't get up. Right. And then he got up, and he's coming again. And so I went to hit at his hand again, and it just slipped, and it hit him in his head. And I knew that I had to get him some help. And I had a couple roommates that lived upstairs. And so they called 911, and the ambulance came to take this old guy away to get him to some help. And I knew he was either on drugs or off of some sort of drugs, right? Like his body language, and like I knew him because he lived at the Salvation Army, which was across the street from where I was living at the time. And yeah, the ambulance came and took him. And I remember them taking the knife out of this guy's like pocket and stuff, but they took him away, and the police took me away, and I didn't think they were going to charge me. Like, they were holding me. And so they searched my house, and they found X amount of weed and other stuff that was in my house. And I sat there for 7.5 months. But you asked if that's what I needed was incarceration, but that is exactly what I needed, because the wheels were off the cart. And I well, I had this moment, and with my God, my Creator, where uh, I was in a jail cell, and I opened up this Bible, and I thought it would make sense once I opened this Bible, actually, um, but I couldn't read it because it was like, I don't know, talk like Yoda from Star Wars. It was the King James version, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um, I just started to pray. I said, you know, um, help that guy. I didn't mean to hurt him. Help him. And help me too. And I was just so sick of being such a strain to my family, a strain to society.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at one time I used to work and I used to provide, right? And I had this big weight of guilt. There was so much that I knew I should have been doing, but I wasn't doing it. So,
Yeah.
and that's where I met Chaplin Barb. So after that moment where I had that prayer,
So hang on
I
just a
felt
second here. Hang on.
yeah.
So how long were you in cells or incarcerated before you had this moment? Like, I just like how long, like, and
Okay.
did you stop using when you went to jail?
Yes. So I stopped using crystal meth October 17, 2009. Or no, sorry, in July 2009. I stopped using everything else like October 16th at or no, I guess it'd been midnight. So that would be October 17th. At midnight was my last drink, my last
Mm-hmm.
joint with my friend, right? And so that's where I guess I needed to be. I needed some time to be of sober mind. And it was a week after that I had that moment where I finally just gave up, and it was either fight for my spot on the unit, where I had been stabbed before on a unit there, or I could just kind of give up and just follow this God that I heard of from Bobby Walker and from my friend Jerome at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I did, and I remember feeling so like, well, I cried myself to sleep, but I remember feeling like things were going to be okay, like for once. And it wasn't confusion. There wasn't anger. There wasn't, um, I was just so overwhelmed. And when I woke up, there was something was different. Right. And so I remember before I fell asleep, so I remember looking behind me because I could literally feel somebody there in that cell with me. Right. And so,
Mm-hmm.
um, and as I was praying that, for that guy, I do remember a light. I do remember that I could feel light inside my cell, and I thought I was going crazy, but I know now that there was someone there,
Mm-hmm.
and that he hasn't left my side ever since. And so I went to a new area in the jail. They transferred me to Delta unit. There was a long-term remand, and I got more time out of my cell, and there was this chaplain Barb, and she changed my life. Um, I don't know if she's listening right now. She's in the hospital. If people could pray for her, please. Um, as So she kept coming in, and she had this book, and it was called A Purpose Driven Life, and I started reading it just because this lady didn't need to be coming in there, but she
Mm-hmm.
was really nice, and I started to read it just so that I could say that I did read it, and it started to make sense. And so my life was for a purpose, and that if I could follow something other than myself, and learn how to love others and to forgive myself, that life was gonna go well. And so it's a faith book, and it's putting God first, and everything else came after. And so after that, I remember the other guys on the unit thought I was going crazy. I started reading my Bible and writing scripture up on the wall, and they're like, Tommy's going crazy. But everything in my mind was polluted, man. Everything. So I'd start out with something, and then there'd be a very negative, angry thought, and I was like, okay, I know this isn't it. So I'd go back to this book. Oh yeah, and Chaplin Barb also gave me this other Bible. It was a New Living Translation Bible, which was in a modern English that I could understand. And so everything just started to make sense to me. And I read that Bible 2.5 times, or yeah, 3.5 times in the 7 months. And there was at one point I just said, like, God, if you really want me to go to treatment, let let me see something. Let me see something where where you want me to go. And so I turn on TV, and there's all this stuff about Teen Challenge, and it wasn't good. It was negative stuff about Serge Leclerc. And I said, well, that's a mixed message, God. So show me again. And this happened
sort your shit out
three
Jesus.
times. Yeah. Anyhow, so finally I said, okay, God, you're giving me mixed messages, because I didn't want to go, to be honest. It was a full year long. I wanted to go to 28 days, right? And so I said, if you want me to go, like, let it be known. And so I turned on like 100 Huntley Street on this Friday, and there was this like Teen Challenge choir, and these guys were jumping up and down, and the one guy looked ridiculous to me, and I said, okay, I'll go, but I'll never be in a choir. Well, I was in a choir when I went to that Teen Challenge program. I went there on June 1st, 2010. I left the correctional, and this point in my life, it's beautiful, because every day I go back to that very correctional. I get to work now as an addictions counselor, and I get to share with them the things that have kept me sober up until now and kept me out of there. And so as I was leaving, Chaplin Barb said, go on and, make me proud, son. And there was another point when I was in there. I remember that I was getting heckled by a few guys for always, praying before my meal and stuff. And the one time when I was getting bugged, this guy was pointing at me. And so this other big guy on the unit, he's a gang member, and he stood up and he was going to like get angry with it. I said, no, don't worry about it. So then there's one day that guy, this big gang member, he started, praying for this meal. And the guys that were heckling me before, because I was like, saying my prayers, well, they weren't heckling that day. And when I told Chaplin Barb that, she said, you're going to preach, child. And I told her, no, I'm not going to preach. I'm a criminal. And she said, one day you're going to realize that that's just a label, and you're not a criminal, right? You're the son of God. And well, she was right. A couple of weeks ago, I guess I was talking at that youth conference, right? So she knew something, right? She had the spiritual eyes. So I went to the Teen Challenge program. It was great. It's a year long. It's faith based. I ended up working for them out in New Brunswick. I used to get arrested every time I went to the east side of Saskatoon. So now I was on the east side of Canada.
Yeah.
And it was like way different. Like I love here in the lakes and stuff, but out there they had the ocean, and that was cool. And so I got to see the Atlantic Canada. It was beautiful.
Let's take a quick break. Break. We're going to look at some more comments, but before we do, let's hear a word from tonight's sponsors.
At Possibilities Recovery Center, we know recovery looks different for everyone. That's why we've developed intensive outpatient addictions treatment and long-term aftercare programs that are client-focused and evidence-based to facilitate a more timely reintegration to community, school, and return-to-work strategies right here in Saskatchewan. To learn more about our life-changing opportunities and to make contact, go to www.possibilitiesrecovery.ca. Call us at 306-242-7023 or visit us during normal business hours at 3711 Thatcher Avenue in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. If you're in the dark, let us help you find the light. Possibilities Recovery Center. What else is possible?
All right, let's look at some comments.
Okay, first up is Lindsay. Thanks for your comment. She says, I worked with Tommy and always wanted to know if telling your story ever gets easier. It must be so hard. You're amazing.
It certainly gets easier, but it's a lot easier because, I've watched you guys' podcast so many times, so I know that you guys are going to help me out, and I don't have to fear this. Thanks, Donna. Thanks, Daniel.
What else we got?
Christina Denoli Cowden says, I had 4 years of sobriety when I found deep denial, which is why I ask about Tommy's journey. Thank you, ninjas.
Mhm.
So when you say that I had 4 years of sobriety, guess what, Christina? You still have that 4 years of sobriety. Just because we lose, we might have a slip or something, you still have that experience. And I wouldn't throw everything away. Just keep going. You still got that sobriety.
Let's see. We've got one here that I can read. It's quite simple. It's from my friend. It's from our friend Keith Bowring. He says, I much prefer you off meth. And we've got
Yes.
one from Alan.
Alan Kaler says, yes, that's exactly what I remember the most, Tommy. Thank you for reminding me to pay attention to that small voice.
Got another one. We're not going to get to all these comments, you guys. I'm sorry. We're going to do our best, though.
And Biscuits McVander Savage, awesome name, man, says, how much time altogether have you done, Tommy? And do you think that incarceration was pivotal in your recovery?
Well, I haven't done a exhaustive how many years if I put them all together. That last one was only 7.5 months, but it was enough time for me to realize where I needed to go, right? And so it's what you do with any amount of time. And so that's where I built the foundations that I have now. That's where I started to devote myself daily to something.
Trap House Testimonies, Chantal Huel. Follow her on Facebook.
Definitely do that. So she says there's an unexplainable feeling about going back inside to work with the people. You're one of my superheroes, Tommy.
And
Thank you, Chantal.
Look at one more, and then we'll have to cap this comments.
Nicole Kate says, until recently, I believed that everyone I loved had abandoned me at one point or another. I now know. You just moved that on me.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
I now know that to not be true. I pushed them away. I became a recluse. I shut myself off completely to all of them. Now I know that I actually abandoned them. I'm grateful to be getting my family back since I've started my new life journey in recovery. Great comment, Nicole. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. You know, Tommy, that brings something to mind for me. Where was your family during all of this? I mean, you mentioned you left home at 15. Did you still keep in contact with them from time to time? Did they ever reach out to you and try to help? What did that look like?
Yeah, my dad did. He was there. I was definitely very manipulative, and he set some healthy boundaries there because I was like trying to manipulate for money, and it was very hard for them. Like I had a conversation with my cousin Wade, and he said it was so hard because he wanted to, to jump in and kind of save the day and help, but he knew that, after talking to my dad, that's not what was needed. And if Wade would have just brought me into his house, I would have brought all of that mayhem in with me, right? So it wasn't until my brain fired that thought that there was more to life than this, and that I can do better, and that I need to get help. So the people that are out there that say that it's just about choice, it isn't just about choice, because my brain was so polluted that I needed that. I needed it constantly. The only choice that needed to have, like, only thing that came about choice was that choice to get help, because I couldn't have done it on my own, right? And so I have met some people that have, but there isn't that fullness of life for so many of them, right? There isn't the maybe the connection that we have, those people that have gone to AA and NA, right? So there is that fellowship that we have, and we can learn off of each other, though, like, especially about emotions and stuff, because our emotions are all over the place when we start to come out of our addiction, right? And so I wasn't crazy. And that's just part of this process. And I needed to just trust this process and just keep coming back and things were going to get better, right? And so having that as for me, AA and NA have been great for my maintaining sobriety. I didn't sober up in AA and NA, but I started to go to them after leaving the Teen Challenge program. And so, I also, after the Teen Challenge program, I worked for them in New Brunswick and here in Saskatchewan. I went to Bible college 1 year of pastoral ministry. I'm going to get back into that one day, actually. When I retire, maybe become a chaplain, like Chaplain Barb, pay it forward. She's a beautiful lady and she loves me completely. And she would send me text messages every day. And it's been 4,923 days, right?
Yeah,
And
boy, yes, it
she's always,
has.
yes. And so she's been there. And so I'd like to be there, and so for the people that are out there and want to know how to support someone, just be there, just listen, don't give money, right?
So when
Yeah.
did the rubber really hit the road for you? Like after you were incarcerated, you found recovery, you found the Chaplain Barb. Was there a pinnacle moment where there was like an aha or that spiritual awakening? And if there was, what brought it about? Because I mean, some people, they get that the clouds part and it all makes sense in that moment, but for others it's more subtle and it takes more time. Like what was it for you?
Well, I did have that moment, right? I mentioned that in jail, where I had that moment that there was light in the cell, and I believe there was an anointing, but there's also support. Like I have started to like do some things that that other people would say, "Okay, Tommy, like, is this really going to help your sobriety?" Especially, like Keith is one person there. He was in the comments there that likes me better off meth. When I had my knee surgery, it was Keith that I called, right, and I would tell him that I took a pill last night to go to bed, to sleep because of my knee, right, and so I had somebody that like the guy loves me, and he would tell me like, you know, get off that if I started to chase it, right? And so, and the one time I had like 3 pills, and I realized that it was like this wasn't right, and he just said like, and are you going to take them tomorrow night? And I'm like, no, I don't think so, man. And he's like, okay. He it was just in the way he asked. It wasn't judgmental. He was just asking. And I needed to not keep it in, because us as guys, we just cram it down. Don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Right. And the moment I could speak it out, I gave voice to it. Right. As Alan would say, Alan Kaler, you give voice to your pain. Because truthfully, I wanted to have those pills the next night. Right. But when I said it, I was like, wait a minute. No, that's not good. I'll take the pain. Right. And so then I just stopped taking the pills, and I've had 3 knee surgeries, and I make it through each one. And if I have to have another knee surgery, I'll probably be calling Keith again, because I need somebody to be accountable to. So I've had that support. For me, my success has come out of my failures as well as the accomplishments. And having that support to be able to talk to somebody and say, okay, I made this mistake, and just to be able to talk about it and not have somebody say, well, that was stupid. Right. So what are you going to do to get through this? And so, I have mentors that I go to, and I have a lot of things that are going on. And I got my addictions counseling diploma through SIIT. Great program. I worked at the Lighthouse through that time. I worked at the Lighthouse for 5 years. And there's a lot of negative stuff that's on the news about like the Lighthouse, but there's something about the Star Phoenix, right? Is that they're going to sell their story, right? And so, and I know this because when I was in the Star Phoenix Kleenex, they started with, now the drunks have some place to go. They were talking about our stabilization unit, Really? That's what you're going to say is the headline? Now the drunks have someplace to go? Or I was in there with the mobile outreach, and they just said, Tommy, you're a recovering meth addict. And I'm just like, that was the headline underneath the picture. And I'm just like, come on, you guys. But they sell their story and stuff. But that place, when I was there was a lot of us, and we loved everybody that was coming through those doors. And so I put a lot of effort into my job there, and I still miss the people that we served, and they need someplace to go. And so it's sad to see whatever is happening down there. And I sure hope that they get to keep those doors open, because we all need a place. We all need to be heard. We all need to be valued. And in those walls, in those, in those shelters, there's somebody else that's just like me that just, I was in and out of the shelter. And so when I got to work at the shelter, there was these people that would come in and they were just like, wait, you work here? You're sober? Like, I just bought drugs off you like how many years ago? Or I just used drugs with you how many years ago? Right? Where you used to drink with you down at the river. And so the best thing that I ever heard, right? The best things that I ever heard was, if you can do it, I can do it too, right? And yeah, you can do it, right? So that's what I told every one of them. And so I've seen I've seen some amazing things come out of there, but you don't see that in the newspapers. So yeah.
When you're working in with that demographic, when you're working in those communities, do you ever find yourself getting triggered? Like, do you ever find yourself like, do the cravings come back ever? Or does the old behavior want to creep back? Like when you're having a bad day and someone rubs you the wrong way?
Well, I could say no, but that'd be a complete lie. I think it was my third day working at the lighthouse, and I don't work at the lighthouse anymore. I work for Saskatchewan Health Authority up at the correctional. I work as an addictions counselor now, but my third day working there was a guy about to have an overdose, and he put like an 8-ball in my hand, right as he's about to have a seizure. And so and so I said, like, can somebody come with me? I need to get rid of this. I'm gonna flush it. And so they're like, why? I just go flush it. And I'm like, no, I need accountability on this. And so I'd be lying to say that, that I wasn't triggered, but I knew that I could just breathe, and I prayed, and I was going to be in those situations. And so the main thing is to talk about it, bring it out. Cause if I just keep pushing it down, then yeah, it's bad. And there were times where, I'm human. So there's times where I would act out. There was a guy that, like, touched somebody inappropriately right in front of me, and this instinct like just took over, and he barely touched the ground as I threw him out of there, right? And so and then after I came in, I said, guys, I'm sorry that I responded like that. And they just said, hey man, we would have done it too, right? And so I just said, but I know better. I know better than to do that. But I couldn't see somebody get sexually assaulted in front of me. So we're all human. I wish I could have that moment back. I wouldn't have handled it quite like that, but it was a learning moment. And so, yeah, we're all human, man. Yeah.
So what's life like today now? You mentioned that you have mentors, and you're working with a program. You sent me a link. Happy to talk a little bit about that. Bring us some awareness to that. But you mentioned that you have mentors. Are you now mentoring others?
Yeah, I'm mentoring a couple people. Yeah, I am. I'm quick to share my experience, strength, and hope with people, for sure. And what's life like now? I'm married. My wife has 2 beautiful girls. I have a son in my life. I met him on February 3rd, 2013. I was my third day working at the lighthouse, same day that overdose thing happened. My son got a hold of me. And so we've been building a relationship. And so what's life like now? I've got my son in my life. I got 2 daughters, right? With my wife. They're with us for 1 week and with their dad for a week. And he's a great guy, lives here in Allen as well. I got grandkids. Life's beautiful. And then there's also in AA and NA, when we do our the serenity prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. It's got me through a lot of things, but it's also challenged me to say, what can I change? And why am I going to hide behind something when I might be able to change something? And so when your passion and your commitment meet people that are brilliant and have other skills, if you surround yourself with brilliant people, there's no end to what you're going to do. And I'm definitely not the smartest person in a lot of rooms. And I learn off of them because they've been through so much. They've been through so much in their life with their families, and they've been through so much. Right now, I'm working with a group of people so that we could develop an online platform for mental health for First Nations, Métis, and rural and remote communities.
What's it called?
So that people could have. It's called Sage Healing. So it'll be called sagehealing.ca. And just like now, where I could see you, a person could be seeing their counselor. And so, and it's just one more tool. And I think that it should be great. And it'll give somebody that opportunity to have a critical conversation before a psychotic break, before a suicide attempt, right? And so there's a lot of help that's out there. I'm quick to tell everybody, like here in Saskatoon, if you're looking for addiction support, Possibilities is great. I worked for them for a day, actually. I helped out. I was on this bus. I think that bus is so cool. There's also, I work for Saskatchewan Health Authority, and 655-7777 is the centralized intake, and you can get some help. We'll get out of this. The pandemic created this virtual online thing, but it also has created a lot of people that have been struggling with their mental health in silence for a while.
Yeah.
And we need to be listening. We need to be checking in on our friends, because we were so used to doing our own thing and being socially distant. But now we need to check. We need to make sure everyone's okay and help bring people out.
Tell us about Unhooked.
Unhooked. I love Unhooked.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a program that I call Unhooked, and so I go
follow
over
follow him on Facebook. Make sure you follow Tommy on Facebook. Unhooked. You say the page name so that I don't get it wrong.
Unhooked Addictions and Wellness Coaching, and so I am a member of the Canadian Psychotherapy Counselors. I just screwed that up. CCPA and CACCF. So I do have insurance, so that when I am talking to people about recovery, but it's just 2 people helping out each other, right? It's not anything that I'm making money at, but I am insured too. And we go over relapse prevention as we're sitting on the ice, or as we're at the side of the lake. And so
I've
had, we go fishing. And so I also want to expand that into like archery, to go like deer hunting, sitting in a deer blind. There's a lot of time. And a lot of times you don't even see a deer till like the last 15 minutes that you're there. And so, and just connecting with people, because that is to me, that's part of spirituality. Something created the whole world outside there. And it's beautiful to be in that hunt, to be with that animal. And so, sorry, excuse me, I got a cold. I managed to not cough until then.
You've been doing fantastic with that, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, the Unhook program, I haven't been able to do as much lately just because of financial, but it's coming right up. Fishing season's coming, and I've got some spots, and so I do want to share. I do want to share with some youth and with some adults, and we can go out. It doesn't cost much for hot dogs, and we build a fire after, and we can cook a fish if we catch one. But yeah, you can look me up on Facebook there too, and
Awesome.
yeah.
All right, man. Well,
just quickly before we taper out here, I just want to mention that Chris Doherty put a comment in, and he says, sorry, it's choking me up. Says, hey, Thomas, just to let you know, the family is so proud of you and happy on how far your life has changed and how far you've gone to help others. Keep spreading the good word, cousin.
Cousin. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
you guys don't jump off yet. We're not done yet. We're going to look at next week's preview here in just a minute. But before we do that, and we're going to spin the wheel, so don't leave yet. But before we do either of those things, Tommy, is there anything that you'd like to leave us with tonight?
Yes. I first of all, I didn't know that we were this far into it. There is a lot of things, right? And when we sober up, there's more things to that is the emotional intelligence part. I didn't know what that was about until I got to look at the deep hurts that were in my life. And by looking at those deep hurts and processing them, I'm able to now be part of my kid's life now. And at the start of my marriage, I might have dropped the ball on that because I wanted to be engaged, but I just didn't know how. I didn't know how to feel these feelings and be comfortable with them. And so us as men, we need to be more in touch with our emotions. And so what it takes is to go through that and to process our stuff and to talk to somebody, because otherwise we're just going to bleed all over the people that didn't hurt us. And we're going to just pass on silence when we don't want that. Yeah. Right. In our addiction, it was don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. But in recovery, we do need to talk. It's going to give us a voice, right? And we need to trust, and we need to be able to feel. And so I wish I could talk more.
Yeah. Part 2 is coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm sorry we got to cap it, but we're coming to the end. But yeah, we'll have you back, my friend. Don't worry about that. But for now, take care, and let's have a look at a clip from our guest next week, Brad Siroski.
I love that guy.
I don't think my problems really started as much with alcoholism as they did with mental health. When I had my first drink at 13 years of age, it took away all the anxiety. It took away the family problems that were happening at home. And then I was introduced to cocaine, and that drug would change my life and almost kill me. And I remember the night that my daughter was born, and I held her in my arms and I sang to her, and she was beautiful, and I cried, and I made her a promise. And I said, I'm going to be the father you deserve. 8 hours later, I was using cocaine in the hospital parking lot with my drug dealer. And eventually, my daughter's mother would threaten to take my daughter away. That was the day I realized I can't live in this hell any longer.
Say, this is Hard Knocks.